New Jersey's COVID-19 travel advisory gets simplified. The governor says don't leave the state unless you have to.
Do travel outside our immediate region, or if you are coming into New Jersey from another state, we strongly encourage you to observe a 14-day self-quarantine period and at the right point, get tested.
This is New Jersey Power and Politics. Hello and welcome to New Jersey Power and Politics. I'm Alex Sedan. President-elect Joe Biden has named the top 4 priorities he'll address when he takes office January 20th. First is the COVID-19 pandemic, then the economic downturn in the wake of that public health crisis. The president-elect also says his administration will meet the moment of reckoning for racial justice and fight climate change. Here to discuss those priorities is Jeanine LaRue, Democratic strategist and senior vice president of Kaufman Zeta Group. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure to come on.
All right, Jeanine, what do you think of the president-elect's list? Did he leave anything out?
I don't think he really left anything out. I think already there are some folks who are a little nervous about some of the nominations or the lack of some of the nominations that we're waiting for. But I think he hit the nail right on the head with his 4 big priorities.
Can I ask you about those nominations? That's been brought up, the fact that there is not a black person in the upper echelon of the cabinet as of yet. Is that a sticking point for you? How do you feel about that?
It's not a sticking point for me, Alex. As you know, I have been involved in a lot of transition teams here in New Jersey. And with the Corzine administration, I was at the table actually interviewing candidates. You're always cognizant of the fact that it's got to be diverse. You're always cognizant of the fact that the folks who actually work very hard to get you elected, but they're not halfway done with their nominations. And we start at the top. We do have a black woman who is the vice president-elect. And we know that she is not shy, as you remember from the debates. Mm-hmm. She is going to be sitting at that table and making the point that it's got to be diverse. And sometimes when we say diverse, we get away with not doing black because Asian and Latina and Native American, there are all types of categories for diverse. But quite frankly, people are going to want to see more black people, African Americans, at the higher echelon. I just want to add quickly for that I think one of the areas folks are looking at is the Attorney General. Right. With all of the issues that have happened throughout our country, that is a key area that I think folks will be looking at very closely.
And you would like to see a black man or woman as Attorney General?
I would. I mean, if I really were calling the shots sitting at that table, I really would have a black man as the Attorney General. I just think it will be a huge statement. I also know that the president-elect made it known very early on that when he gets a seat on the Supreme Court, he wants to put a black woman there, because that has never happened at that level. And here in New Jersey, our own Governor Murphy did it for the first time. In New Jersey, he put a black woman on the New Jersey Supreme Court.
That's right. I wanted to break down those 4 areas with you just broadly. As a strategist, which one of those 4 areas is going to be the tougher sell for the president-elect to get through Congress or to the American people?
Well, the economic part of it is going to be very tough because it's going to take a lot of money. I mean, it's going to take Mitch McConnell and others playing nicely in the sandbox. It is not going to be easy. Once you start talking about these large stimulus packages and other types of things that he's going to have to do, people begin to jockey for other things and their own issues as far as what they don't believe in, groups that they have problems with, that will also come through. But what I have found in government is what is important to folks, that is what gets funded, and what gets funded is what is important to administrations.
And I want to ask you too then, something that's very important is the racial justice component. What should the administration do and what could they do with or without Congress?
Well, I think that there are some areas with executive orders that the administration should think about doing. I think that they're going to actually take care of DACA. That definitely has to be done. I think that they are going to look at some type of police reform. And one of the things that I'm glad about the president-elect, he has made it very clear he doesn't believe in defunding the police. And I'm glad about that. You may know that I am actually the communications consultant for the Fraternal Order of Police here in New Jersey, and they did not endorse this president-elect. But I think that he is really bent on bringing everybody under the tent and trying to work together for justice for everyone. He is quite sincere about that.
All right, Janine LaRue, Senior Vice President at Kaufman Zeta Group, thank you very much for your time.
And thanks for having me, Alex.
The state legislature is still working to set up a legal marijuana market before cannabis becomes legal on January 1st due to the constitutional amendment approved last month. Now, at the same time, Republicans on the state Senate Budget Committee say they want a relief package for small business. Here now is a Republican member of the Budget Committee, State Senator Declan O'Scanlan of Monmouth County. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Alex. How you doing?
All right, now tell me this. Should the legislature hold off on coronavirus relief until we see what, if anything, is coming in from D.C.?
No. We already have money here. We were given over $2 billion in CARES Act money, much of which has been distributed at this point. I'll give the governor credit for finally getting that out. We were a little slow, but I'll give him credit. But big parts of it have ended up essentially in our surplus, which is building every day. So we have hundreds of millions of dollars, which we could afford to give to our small businesses now to help keep them afloat and help keep that massive section of our economy going through the end of this, so that we have that economic vitality going forward. It's an investment in our economic future to help these folks stay alive and to stay in business. So we have hundreds of millions of dollars that we can and should be using to get out to keep these folks above water, and that's all that's going to happen. No one's going to get rich. They're all struggling, and we all have a vested interest in helping these businesses stay alive. So no, we shouldn't wait for whatever DC is going to do. We can't possibly give these folks more than they need at this point. We're looking at some serious.
There's obviously a lot of economic pain. There's a lot of economic pain, but there's also a lot of health pain going around. We've got hospitalizations over 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000 new COVID cases per day. So under those conditions, I want to ask you this question. Do you, like other Republicans, say that some of the governor's executive orders are tyrannical? And if so, tell me which ones.
Look, I don't want to be too inflammatory by going down the tyrannical path. The governor and I have had some very heated discussions, certainly during the spring, and we don't always agree. I don't want to ascribe tyrannical motivations to it. I think it's policy disagreement. So maybe it's a competence issue, maybe it's a misreading of science issue where we disagree. But regardless, some of the policy positions and restrictions don't make sense. And for instance, our restaurants are struggling. You could make a scientific argument about bar service after 10 o'clock when people start doing some drinking and socializing more than maybe they should. Okay, I get that. But closing restaurants at 10 and food service and sit down service doesn't make sense. You don't have the same, and the governor said himself, indoor dining doesn't seem to be a problem. So if we're going to take away bar service, which is 30% of the bottom line for restaurants, and then you take away, you have them operate at 25%, you're taking away 75% of the remaining 30%, you can see where that really, really puts a crimp on these folks. And then you force them to stop serving at 10 o'clock. So it eliminates a whole separate seating. I'm thinking we could expand some of those things responsibly, with health in mind, and make a dramatic difference for these folks. That's the kind of threading of the needle that we need to see happen. We are pushing the administration on this now, virtually every day. And I'm hopeful. I'm hearing that there's open-mindedness. I'm hopeful that there is. But on the flip side, we do have to be careful to not have our hospitals fill up. Now, we're not in danger of doing that yet, but we do have to be mindful that that's on the mind of the governor. It needs to be on the minds of all of us. We can't have people fail to get health care. Right. We can't overwhelm our systems, and we can't overwhelm the people who are caring for all of us. So we got to be mindful of the strain that we have on our frontline workers.
Now, I wondered if I could just move on to marijuana for a moment.
Overtaxing, overregulating, and overcomplicating things. And that's where a big part of the problem is. If two jobs should be tied for job one, maintaining the robustness of our medical program, which is one of the best in the world, the most clinical in the world. And number two, we need to crush the illicit market that feeds cartels, and feeds entities that have every incentive to push marijuana laced with God knows what and other drugs onto our children. We have to be killing the illicit market. So you need to keep the price reasonable. You see, other states have made the mistake. California is an example, and some others, even worse than California, have overtaxed. And that opens up a door to a perpetuated illicit market, and it's a mess. We shouldn't make that mistake. And by the way, our enabling constitutional amendment essentially promised all we would apply would be a sales tax at the retail end. And now we've got this excise tax, came out of nowhere. It's ridiculous.
All right. Well, Senator Declan O'Scanlan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Stay tuned. There's more to come on New Jersey Power and Politics. Welcome back to New Jersey Power and Politics. I'm Alex Sedan. 6 New Jersey hospitals will receive doses of Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine within days as part of the Trump administration's Operation Warp Speed. But this comes as contact tracers in New Jersey continue to be frustrated at low levels of cooperation as they try to trace the path of COVID-19 infections. Here now is Dr. Perry Halkitis, Dean of the School of Health at Rutgers University, School of Public Health, who devised New Jersey's contact tracing program. Welcome back to the show, Doctor.
Hi, Alex. Good to see you again.
Tell me this, why are people so reluctant to help contact tracers?
Well, that's a very heavy question, but I will try to break it down. So I think first and foremost, what's happened over the course of the last 6 months or 7 months since we last talked in March is that issues like mask wearing and contact tracing have become highly politicized. And as a result of that, people are hesitant. Number two, I think the other thing is that it's always been the problem with contact tracing is that people fear that providing any sort of information is going to be an infringement on their privacy. And those two things in combination. For the contact tracers nowadays, in the last week, month or so, here in the state of New Jersey, life has become very, very challenging. Contact tracing was supposed to prevent us from getting where we are today. Unfortunately, during the course of the summer, when we should have been really enacting this at, high warp speed, we weren't. And here we are today in December with the escalations that we continue to see.
I wanted to ask you then if you can draw a line for me, if the politicization of contact tracing, do you fear that that's going to bleed over into the vaccine distribution to get misinformation and politicization about the vaccine distribution?
The vaccine is the vaccine first and foremost in and of itself is politicized, right? And why is it politicized? You have two camps here. You have two factions here. On the one hand, you have the people who believe that the virus is a hoax. Therefore, I don't need a vaccine. Building on, a history of anti-vaxxers here in the United States. On the other hand, you have the individuals who are, very, very cautious of the vaccine because they feel that the president's approach may have been, laden with shortcuts that may make it unsafe. I think the latter camp, if President Biden and others step up and actually take the vaccine, that camp will become much more likely to engage with the vaccine. But you're also right to note that the other political aspects here are who gets the vaccine. Right. And the CDC last week noted, or actually this week noted, that healthcare providers and people living in nursing homes are to get it first. And my response to that is, as a person who believes in health equity and social justice, there are mail carriers and people working in restaurants, who are also at risk, as much risk as, if not more risk than healthcare providers. Why aren't we talking about them?
But doctor, then if you were, let's put you in charge of vaccine distribution, how would you do it? We've been told that New Jersey is only going to get about 130,000 doses or 130,000 vaccines for 130,000 people in the initial offering. How would you put them out?
So look, I think that for me, there are two groups that come to mind right away. absolutely, older folks living in nursing homes are at particularly high risk of dying. There's no doubt about it, right? But there is another group outside the healthcare providers, the people that I would like to refer to as the emerging adults, the 18 to 30, 35-year-olds, who are the ones who are, for the most part, not developing symptoms, are socially engaging with each other at much higher rates than older adults in this country, and likely, very likely, the transmission vectors for the virus.
So just to get this clear, you almost would want to preemptively vaccinate those folks.
Correct. I'm using a public health approach, which is like I'm going to vaccinate those people who are potentially the ones who are spreading the disease more rapidly in our population. Correct.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the second wave of COVID. We've had about 4,000, almost 5,000 new cases a day, hospitalizations at around 3,000. Obviously, we have more testing now, but what's your take on this second wave, as the governor calls it? Is it worse than the first, the same, or better, but just with more testing?
Or third wave, right? I'm not convinced it's just a second wave, quite frankly. So, look, we are several months into this epidemic. We know much more than when we last talked in March, you and I, right? So that is a really, really important thing to remember. So we're able to actually, treat this much more effectively. So, on the one hand, we are better in that regard. On the other hand, that is compounded by the fact that people are just exhausted, that people just need some sense of normalcy in their lives. And as a result of that, there's much more risk taking, compounded by a period of the summer where we were free and outside, where we're now all coming inside, and the disease is potentially growing even more and spreading even more rapidly. So on the one hand, from a biomedical perspective, we're in a better shape. From a behavioral perspective, I think we're in a much worse shape.
And I do want to ask you about that behavior too. We've heard these restrictions, or I should say suggestions, for the holidays, small gatherings for Thanksgiving, no singing, no shouting. On one level, Doc, these sound ridiculous, but are they sound medical advice?
They are sound medical advice. I stayed home, with my partner in our apartment, and I saw my brother, who has MS, who lives in Queens, not far from us, and we saw each other on Zoom. And I think that it is very easy to transmit in a tight space. So, there's no magic number how many people should be in your space, right? So the number 10 has been floated about, but 10 people in 700 square feet is very different than 10 people in 7,000 square feet. And quite frankly, if you were to test everybody at the door with a rapid test, which we could possibly do, you could let them in. And I think we are not far in our society from a place where we might be implementing such a rapid testing to let people into large arenas. That's how we potentially get back to normalcy also, before the vaccine is widespread and available.
Last question to you. The president-elect says he's considering a 100-day masking request, not a mandate. Is this going to help, or is that pretty much what we're doing already?
Yeah, there is no mandate right now. I mean, I think there's this mixed messaging. There's it is, I have spent the last few months actually talking about the United States in comparison to Greece. And Greece had one unified response and a much, much lower mortality rate per capita than we did here in the United States, even though they are a much less affluent country than the United States. We have 51 responses to this epidemic, 51 different approaches, not one central response from the top. Certainly a president currently who does not believe in masking. There are going to be people who is going to think that President Biden is overreaching. But you know what? If you actually care about the people in your life, and you care about the society, and you really want the economy to kickstart again, wear your mask.
All right. Dr. Perry Halkitis, Dean of the Rutgers School of Public Health. Thanks very much.
Alex, always a pleasure.
Thank you. Stay tuned. There's more to come on New Jersey Power and Politics. Welcome back to New Jersey Power and Politics. I'm Alex Sedan. A bipartisan deal for coronavirus stimulus in Washington this past week. One of the leaders, New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Democrat, who's co-chair of the House's Problem Solvers Caucus. The nearly $908 billion relief proposal includes money for states and cities, unemployment insurance, and almost $300 billion in small business relief.
The Problem Solvers Caucus proudly voted to endorse this package, meaning it now has the support of 50 members of Congress, 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans. who combined represent millions of families and businesses who need immediate action. They want to get help, and they're sick and tired, like we all are, of waiting for COVID relief.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said that he thinks the problem solver solution will take too long to enact. Well, after several setbacks this fall, Governor Murphy and Democratic legislative leaders have a deal on setting up a legal marijuana market. Voters overwhelmingly approved legalization on November 3rd, but left it to legislators to work out the details. Lawmakers had faced stumbling blocks on the tax rate and number of cultivation licenses. A Friday statement from Governor Murphy, Senate President Steve Sweeney, and Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin only announced an agreement on the framework for legalization, but that means the final bill has a very good chance of becoming law. Well, that just about wraps it up. We'd like to hear what you think about anything we discussed on today's show. Email us or comment on our Facebook page. Give us your take on the latest political headlines. And that will do it for this week. I'm Alex Sedan. Thanks for watching New Jersey Power and Politics, and we will see you next time.